Bryan Battle has come to terms with his UFC release after a pair of costly weight misses, admitting that he has no one to blame but himself. The Ultimate Fighter 29 winner first ran into trouble last December, when he failed to make the welterweight limit for a bout against Randy Brown. Hoping to correct the issue, the Butcher moved up to middleweight in his next booking. Unfortunately, things only went further south. For his scheduled fight with Nursultan Ruziboev, Battle weighed in at 190 pounds, 4 pounds over the non-title limit. The fight was immediately scrapped, and the UFC cut ties with him shortly afterward. Speaking to MMA Fighting after the release, Battle was candid and self-reflective about the situation. "I definitely knew that it was a possibility," he explained. "I thought it was something that could happen, and, it was justified. It's not something I'm gonna complain about at all. But I'm not gonna lie, I thought they weren't gonna cut me. I didn't think that was gonna happen. But that's what happened. And that's a result of my own actions. So now we're on to the next thing. That next step comes in the form of a new opportunity outside the UFC." Just days after his exit, Battle was confirmed for a slot on Dirty Boxing Championship 3, DBX3, in Miami, where he'll face Derek DeFreitas this Friday, August 29th. The event streams live on the promotion's official YouTube channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The card won't be short on recognizable names either. Joining Battle are several other ex-UFC fighters, including heavyweight knockout artist Jairzinho Rozenstruik, fan favorite Jessica Rose Clark, veteran Tyson Nam, and slick striker Alex Caceres. With that lineup, DBX is looking to carve out a unique niche in the crowded combat sports market. For Battle, it's a chance at a fast rebound. Instead of sitting idle, he's diving right back into competition, aiming to remind fans why he was once one of the brightest prospects to emerge from The Ultimate Fighter. The road back to the UFC may be long, but a strong showing in Miami could be the first step in rewriting the narrative after one of the most frustrating chapters of his career. Renato Moicano isn't buying into the Arman Tsarukyan hype, and he believes Ilia Topuria would run straight through the lightweight contender if the two ever meet inside the octagon. Speaking in an interview, the Brazilian made it clear he doesn't view Tsarukyan as the lightweight threat many have made him out to be. "I don't think Arman Tsarukyan is as good as people think. I think Topuria would screw him," Moicano said. "I have nothing against Arman, but Arman isn't a guy I'd be friends with." The comments are notable given the way Moicano and Tsarukyan's paths crossed earlier this year. At UFC 311 in January, Tsarukyan was scheduled to fight Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title but was forced to withdraw at the last minute. Moicano stepped in on short notice and was submitted by Makhachev in the opening round. That experience, Moicano argues, gave him a closer look at the elite tier of the division, and he doesn't see Tsarukyan quite belonging in that company. Meanwhile, the conversation around Ilia Topuria's first lightweight title defense continues to heat up. While Tsarukyan is the consensus #1 contender after his win over Charles Oliveira at UFC 300, another name keeps surfacing: Paddy Pimblett. Former bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz recently said on the Anakin Florian podcast that a Topuria-Pimblett clash makes the most sense, not necessarily for sporting reasons, but for financial ones. "This thing's about paychecks at a time," Cruz explained. "We're prize fighters. You put a prize out there, we take the prize. Who's the biggest prize? We all know the answer between those three." Cruz pointed to the viral moment at UFC 317, when Topuria had just scored a career-defining knockout of Charles Oliveira, and Pimblett confronted him in the cage. That stare-down, according to Cruz, was the kind of promotional gold that could justify fast-tracking Pimblett into a title shot despite other contenders waiting their turn. "Paddy promotes, he talks, he's got a very big package. It just makes sense to make the most money with that fight," Cruz said, while also wondering how Topuria's new contract with the UFC could affect his matchmaking priorities going forward. For now, Tsarukyan remains the frontrunner in the rankings, but between Moicano's dismissal of his skill set and Cruz's push for the Pimblett fight, the undefeated Spanish-Georgian champion has no shortage of narratives circling his next move. The UFC's new $7.7 billion broadcast deal with Paramount Plus has split opinions across the fight world. On one hand, It marks the end of the pay-per-view era as we know it, giving fans unprecedented access to every UFC event for a flat subscription fee, rather than shelling out for each card. On the other, fighters and observers have voiced concerns that losing PPV points, the performance-based incentives tied to card sales, might drastically reduce how much athletes can earn at the highest level. But according to Ali Abdelaziz, longtime manager of stars like Khabib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev, the deal should be viewed as a win for fighters. Speaking with Submission Radio, Abdelaziz dismissed the idea that fighters will lose leverage with the end of PPVs, arguing instead that Paramount's deep pockets and broader distribution will create more sponsorships and revenue opportunities. He noted that champions such as Ilia Topuria and Khamzat Chimaev, fighters who are at the forefront of the UFC's new generation, will benefit directly when the deal kicks in fully in 2026. "I think it's the best thing for the fighters," Abdelaziz said. "No PPV, especially for champions. People are going to make a lot more money, a lot more opportunities. You're going to be on Open TV, CBS, millions and millions of homes, more sponsors. Everybody should be excited." Georges St. Pierre recently voiced skepticism, saying fighters historically relied on PPV points to maximize earnings. Abdelaziz countered that the UFC itself will nearly double its revenue with the Paramount deal, which in turn should trickle down to the roster. He also pointed out that the PPV model has been broken for years, plagued by piracy and inconsistent buy rates. Perhaps his sharpest point was on Conor McGregor's outsized influence on the PPV era. UFC, right now, has no PPV star outside of Conor McGregor. "Nobody can hit 1,000,000 buys," Abdelaziz claimed. "When you hit 1,000,000 buys, that's when you start making a lot more money. If we're not getting our fighters more money, we should not be managers." For Abdelaziz, the shift isn't a curse, but a long overdue correction. The new streaming-focused partnership guarantees exposure on Paramount Plus and simulcasts on CBS, which he believes will outweigh the unpredictability of PPV economics. As the UFC enters this new phase, the debate continues. Will broader reach and sponsor-driven revenue truly mean bigger paychecks for fighters? Or will the loss of PPV points leave the roster with less control over their earning potential? Stuart Smith, better known to fans as Syko Stu, remains hospitalized after a shocking incident at a Noche Pro Wrestling event in Los Angeles over the weekend. The California-based wrestler was violently attacked inside the ring by Raja Jackson, son of former UFC champion Quinton "Rampage" Jackson, in a sequence that was broadcast live on Kick and quickly spread across social media. In the footage, Jackson storms into the ring, lifts Smith high into the air, and slams him onto the mat before raining down more than 20 punches. Even as Smith appeared unconscious, Jackson continued throwing strikes until he was pulled off by fellow wrestlers. Smith's brother, Andrew Smith, provided updates on Facebook in the hours following the assault. Late Sunday night, he wrote that Syko Stu was stable, but in critical care. By Monday, he added that Stuart was now conscious and able to communicate, noting that his brother had some recollection of events from the day of the attack. "Thank you for the outpouring of support," Andrew wrote. "Stuart is conscious and does have some recollection of events from the day of the attack. He's currently resting and says thank you for the love and support. Please continue to keep him in your prayers." Diego Lopez and Jean Silva have already added some spice to their Noche UFC 3 headliner weeks before fight night. After the bout was announced for September 13th in San Antonio, Texas, Silva resurfaced an old tweet from Lopez training wrestling in Oklahoma and challenged him to a wager. "I bet my purse that you don't take me down," Silva wrote in Portuguese. Lopez, who's landed 2 takedowns across his UFC run but has largely relied on his slick grappling and knockout power, laughed off the idea. Speaking with MMA Fighting, he brushed it aside. "Brother, leave him with his money," Lopez said. "I don't want to make him have no money. Leave him with his money, because I think he will need the money, right?" Silva, undefeated in the UFC at 5-0 with 5 finishes, has been notoriously difficult to ground. Only 4 takedowns conceded in 28 attempts against him. He most recently submitted Bryce Mitchell, solidifying himself as one of the featherweight division's most dangerous rising threats. Lopez, meanwhile, has already tested himself against elite names. He stepped up on short notice against Movsar Evloev in his UFC debut and later fought Alexander Volkanovski for the featherweight belt. He admitted wrestling was his weakest area, so earlier this year he went to Oklahoma to immerse himself in the sport from scratch. Training alongside All-Americans, world champions and Olympic-caliber wrestlers, Lopez said the experience completely reshaped his approach. In the Volk fight, of the 11 takedowns he tried, I defended 10, Lopez noted. My goal was to learn and make my takedown defense better. I don't have good takedown defense, but I'm getting better at it. Despite Silva's challenge, Lopez doesn't expect the Brazilian finisher to test his wrestling at all. I don't think he will try to take me down, man, Lopez said with a grin. Not underestimating him or any of that. He might try, but if he takes me down, I have no problem being on the bottom. But I'll be really surprised if he tries. Whether the purse bet ever becomes serious or not, the build-up shows both fighters are ready to bring plenty of confidence and banter into their San Antonio clash. Magomed Ankalaev is already casting an eye toward heavyweight, but before he can make that leap, he knows there's unfinished business to handle at 205 pounds. The reigning UFC light heavyweight champion recently revealed that he expects to need about 2 more victories before making the permanent move up a division, a step he believes will define the next chapter of his career. That road most likely runs straight through a rematch with Alex Pereira. Ankalaev hasn't been shy about criticizing the former champion, going as far as to call Pereira's performance at UFC 313 running. Their rivalry seems destined to reach its conclusion at UFC 320, where a second meeting could serve as the definitive test that cements Ankalaev's reign at light heavyweight. Still, Pereira isn't the only challenge looming. Khalil Rountree has emerged as one of the scariest knockout threats in the division, carrying a level of raw power that few can withstand. Meanwhile, former champion Jiří Procházka remains an unpredictable puzzle, with his unorthodox style and proven ability to rally back from adversity. Ankalaev has acknowledged that conquering this field will be necessary before he can confidently call his time at 205 complete. If he clears them all out, however, the move to heavyweight begins to make perfect sense. Ankalaev's striking discipline, world-class wrestling pedigree, and ability to control the pace of fights make him a uniquely dangerous candidate to compete with the best big men in the sport. Matchups with Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich, or even Jon Jones have already fueled speculation among fans, who are eager to see how his skill set would translate against larger opposition. For now, the champion is staying focused on defending his belt and proving once and for all that he's the most complete fighter in the light heavyweight division. But if Ankalaev keeps his word, just 2 more wins might be all that separate him from chasing history and greatness in a second UFC weight class. Vadim Nemkov is staying with the Professional Fighters League, closing the door on any immediate move to the UFC. The former Bellator light heavyweight champion and current PFL heavyweight contender has signed a new multi-year deal, as confirmed by PFL chairman Don Davis on X. Davis hinted at marquee matchups in Nemkov's future, name-dropping Francis Ngannou, Renan Ferreira, and Oleg Popov as possible opponents for the Fedor Emelianenko protege. Nemkov himself acknowledged in an interview with FightTime.ru that the UFC was briefly in the picture, but the offer didn't match what PFL put on the table. When the previous contract ended, there were negotiations with the UFC, but there were misunderstandings, plus the conditions were twice as bad as in the PFL, Nemkov explained. If I were 20 to 25 years old, I would probably go to the UFC, but they made it clear to me that they are not particularly interested in fighters from Russia. Despite choosing to stay, Nemkov didn't shut the door on the UFC forever. He said that if he dominates PFL competition, attitudes might shift by the time his new contract winds down in a couple of years. At 33, Nemkov has one of the most decorated resumes outside the UFC. He defended the Bellator light heavyweight belt 4 times against names like Corey Anderson, Phil Davis, Yoel Romero, and Ryan Bader, before moving up to heavyweight under the PFL banner. Since the Bellator-PFL merger, he's already beaten former PFL champion Bruno Capoloza and ex-UFC veteran Tim Johnson. With Davis promising blockbuster heavyweight fights ahead, Nemkov is expected to return to action this November. Whoever gets the call, the Russian standout remains one of the top pound-for-pound fighters operating outside the UFC spotlight. Paulo Costa may have finally turned the corner after breaking his skid with a strong performance at UFC 318, and now he's looking for a matchup that would inject him right back into the heart of the middleweight title picture. Fresh off his win over Roman Kopylov, the always fiery Brazilian has set his sights on none other than Dricus du Plessis, the South African who just recently lost his belt to Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 319. Costa explained in a sit-down with Submission Radio why the pairing excites him more than a potential rematch with old rival Israel Adesanya. Though acknowledging Adesanya would always be a significant fight, Costa said that DDP makes more sense right now given the timing and the relevance of beating the man who so recently held UFC gold. "Oh my god, unpredictable, he's so unpredictable," Costa said of du Plessis. "Yeah, he's a tough guy. Tough guy to fight, to be honest. Very tough, you know. And Khamzat knew that. That's why he held him for so long." Du Plessis' relentless pressure and awkward but effective style earned him the championship earlier this year, but his reign ended quickly against Chimaev. Costa believes that if he can topple du Plessis now, it would catapult him closer to the opportunity he craves most, another crack at UFC gold. Currently ranked number 13 at middleweight, Costa is under no illusions about how tough the road is. But he argues that a win over the former champion would immediately put him back in the mix of contenders who are circling Chimaev. While Adesanya remains one of the division's biggest names, and a rematch would come with its own allure, Costa made it clear that du Plessis is the fight he wants. The matchup would not only be a stylistic clash between two unpredictable fighters, but also a chance for Costa to take a massive leap forward in a single night. With Costa now healthy, vocal and motivated, the question is whether the UFC agrees with his vision, and if du Plessis, eager to rebound from the loss of his title, is willing to meet him before the year closes out. Belal Muhammad isn't backing down in his pursuit of a clash with Kamaru Usman. The two former champions have had tension brewing for months, with Muhammad regularly calling for the matchup and Usman never shying away from firing back. While nothing has been made official, the rivalry is starting to feel inevitable, given how their careers are currently aligned. Muhammad is coming off a tough loss, dropping his welterweight belt to Jack Della Maddalena in a fight that halted his momentum. Still, he remains one of the most consistent names in the division, and is determined to prove that his setback was temporary. Usman, on the other hand, recently snapped his own skid by outpointing Joaquin Buckley at UFC Atlanta, a victory that re-established him as a top player at 170 pounds. For both men, a head-to-head battle could be the kind of fight that resets their championship trajectories. While it might not guarantee the winner an immediate title shot, it would put them just a step away, especially given the lack of fresh contenders in the division. Speaking during a fan Q&A ahead of UFC 319, Muhammad once again made his stance clear. He insisted that Usman is the only opponent he's focused on, doubling down on his willingness to sign on the dotted line. "Honestly, for me, I'm not even really paying attention to anybody else," he explained. "I'm looking at my next fight, my next opponent. If you guys see Usman around here, make sure you tell him that I'm looking for him." He added that the holdup isn't coming from his side. "Just waiting for one of these guys to stop talking and sign the contract. We're looking for Usman. We're ready. I'm ready. I've been ready. I'm healthy. I've been training. I'm ready. I'm hungry." If the fight does come together, it's a compelling stylistic clash. Muhammad's pace, pressure, and relentless cardio have carried him through most of his UFC run, while Usman's championship pedigree, wrestling base, and improved boxing have long made him a nightmare matchup. Both men have plenty to prove, Usman wants to show he still belongs at the top after his recent struggles, and Muhammad is desperate to silence doubters and remind fans why he earned UFC gold in the first place.